Jess from Sallie Tomato. I design patterns for purses and home decor. And today I want to show you how to make this adorable and easy bag with fringe, and I only use the BL9 sewing machine. So this bag features a variety of different trims, and there are pom-poms, there's ribbon, and I'll show you how to attach all of those. It also has a nice zipper pocket on the top, and the bag is fully lined so you can easily store your items inside. On the back side, I have a nice pocket for putting your cell phone or other easy to access items in the back. And also you get to use cork fabric in this project if you would like. I did the strap out of cork fabric and the tabs on the zipper out of cork fabric too. So let's get started. The first thing we're going to do is add the fringe onto the front of the bag. And be sure to download the instructions for how to cut out your pattern pieces and for what other supplies that you need. So I have a variety of trims laid out here in the order that I want to put them on the bag. And we can use mine for reference. So first I'm going to mark 1/2 inch from the bottom edge of the bag. And I'm using just a friction pen so it'll be able to be removed later. Then I'm going to start from the bottom and align the first trim even with that 1/2 inch mark. And I'm just going to put some pins in. Now that I have that pinned, I'm going to go over to my machine and use my open toe foot to stitch down this first layer of trim. I've already have my open toe foot attached to the machine, and for this particular trim I want to tack it down with a zigzag stitch. This is a very delicate trim, so a straight stitch wouldn't hold it down as well as a zigzag stitch. So on my machine, letter C is the zigzag stitch, and I'm going to turn it to 2.5 for the length. So line up the top edge of the trim underneath the open toe foot. I'm using the open toe foot because there is a groove underneath on the bottom edge of the foot, and that will help keep my trim in place and keep it from shifting. Another thing is that there is this nice wide open area, so I can make sure that I stitch evenly across the edge of the trim. So let's go ahead and sew. I'm going to take out the pins as I go. If you want to be real thorough, then you can backstitch at the beginning, but these trims will be sewn into the seam, so you don't have to worry too much about backstitching. Okay, and backstitch. Now we have our first trim down, and we can continue to add the rest of the trims until we reach 1 inch from the top edge of the bag. So the next trim that I have is another delicate trim, and I don't want to use a zigzag on this because it might be distracting, so I'm just going to do a straight stitch on this one instead. So position it on the bag and pin in place. So now back at the machine, I'm going to use the same foot again because this will help guide the trim through the machine, and turn it back to straight stitch. Now we have 2 rows of trim done, and this next row is a little bit different. We have a ribbon, and I'm going to use the straight stitch again right along the edge there, so it'll be sunk right into the threads and it'll look really professional. I'm going to overlap on the previous trim that we stitched down so there's a nice clean finish. And again, the open toe foot works great for this type of trim. And remember, when you're using the BL9, to always turn the hand wheel before you cut the threads, so that way the take-up lever is at the highest position. And then we'll sew the other side of the trim. So now we have a variety of trims on our bag, and we've been able to use the same foot. We'll use the same foot for this fringe, but I'm going to switch back to a zigzag. We have a wider area to stitch, and I think it will hold it a little bit more securely with the zigzag. So again, the zigzag stitch is C. Now for this next trim, I'm going to add on some pom-poms, and we're going to switch over to the zipper foot to help make this a little bit easier. So to attach the zipper foot, I'm just going to push the lever on the back of the machine and take away the open toe foot. And we're going to be stitching on the left side. So first, before I even put the foot on, for safety, I want to make sure that we're on center straight needle position. And we'll attach the foot on the left side. So just position the zipper foot underneath the needle and put down the presser foot to clamp it onto the machine. Now I've aligned my pom-poms so that they cover up that zigzag and it'll look a little bit more professional. And now we're ready to stitch. When you're lining up the pom-poms with the zipper foot, make sure that the needle is in line with the allowance of the pom-poms. So you won't want to stitch on top of the pom-poms because that will ruin them, but just stitch right along the very edge to tack them down in place. And do this nice and slow to make sure that your pom-poms stay straight across the entire front of the bag. Now you can continue to add the remaining trims until you are 1 inch away from the top of the bag, and you can mark this with your ruler. Now we have all the trims sewed on, and it's okay if you don't make it to that 1 inch line perfectly or if you go over a little bit. So next is to finish off the back pocket. I have already ironed the top edge of the pocket 1/2 inch to the right side, and to finish it off, we're just going to cover up the raw edge with some trim and sew it on our machine just like we added the trim on the front of the bag. And flip it over to tack down the other side of the trim. Now that we're done sewing down all of the trim, then take a large scissors and cut off the excess so it's even with the side edges of the pocket and the bag. And now we're ready to work on the straps. For the next section of the video, I'm going to show you how to make the crossbody strap, the strap connectors, and then the zipper for the top of the bag. And for this part of the directions, I decided to use Cork fabric because it doesn't fray. It's very easy to cut and sew with, and you can also iron it from both sides. So I was able to sew with it just fine on the BL9 machine, and I think it will work great on any home sewing machine as well. So to make the zipper, I already have one tab attached to the other side. It's cut to the length that I need it, and I tacked off both of the ends. So I'll just show you how I added this tab on. To finish off the raw edge, I have a square of fabric, and I'm just going to fold it over the edge of the zipper to encase the end closed. And just try your best to line up both edges of the Cork fabric so they're even. And you won't want to use pins if you're using Cork fabric because it will leave a permanent hole in the material. So I like to use the Wonder Clips. And then I have the standard foot on the machine, and I'm just going to sew about 1/8 of an inch away from the edge of the tab. And I am using a nylon zipper, so you can sew over the zipper teeth, but I'm going to turn the hand wheel just as a precaution so my needle will not break. And then we can continue to sew to the end. So our zipper is ready to go into the bag, and we can set this aside for now. And the next step is to make the connectors to attach the crossbody strap. So take one D-ring and one of the connector pieces and just thread it through the D-ring. So the wrong sides are on the underside of the D-ring, and fold it in half, aligning those raw edges. And just use a Wonder Clip to hold it in place for now, and do the same for the remaining D-ring and connector. And you can set the connectors aside. Then we're going to work on the strap. So for the strap, turn it over so the wrong side is facing towards you, and fold each end to the center. And use the Wonder Clips to hold the folds in place. And your strap will be longer than this. I'm just using it to show you in the video, but use your Wonder Clips to fold both ends for the entire length of the strap. Now we'll take it over to the machine and top stitch along both length sides to hold the folds in place. For this particular strap width, just following the edge of the strap with the edge of the presser foot is perfect. And make sure that your folds are nice and tight as you sew. So we'll trim the ends of the strap. And to sew the other side, just fold in until it is even with the center edge, and line your presser foot again up with this fold and sew along the entire length. And now we're ready to add the purse hardware, which is my favorite part because I'm kind of obsessed with adding purse hardware. So for this particular project, we'll use 2 swivel hooks and then a strap adjuster, so the crossbody strap can be adjustable if you want to have it across your body or as a shoulder bag. So first, we'll add the slider buckle. Thread the end of the strap over the center bar of the slider buckle, and we'll flip it over to the wrong side. Then fold the end of the strap 1/2 inch to the underside, and then about 1.5 inches to the underside again. Then we will top stitch the end of strap to itself with about 1/4 inch seam allowance. A tip that I have for sewing seams and straps like this is to position your needle so it is over the center of the strap. And we will first begin by back stitching, and this will prevent our even edges from shifting forward if we were to start sewing forward. So we'll start in the middle and back stitch. And now we will forward stitch. And just for reinforcement, back stitch across the entire strap again. So that was easy enough, and now we can add on one of our swivel hooks. So take the opposite end of your strap that doesn't have the hardware on it, and slide 1 swivel hook over the end until it is a few inches away from the adjustable buckle. Then take that unsewn end of the strap and thread it back through the adjustable buckle, and make sure that the folded seam edge is towards you and then the flat side is on your workspace. So thread it through so you're covering up that fold, and it'll be concealed in the strap. And then take the remaining swivel hook and thread it through. And just like before, we'll fold the end of the strap 1/2 inch to the underside, and then about 1 inch or 1.5 inches, just enough so that way you won't hit your hardware. And then we'll sew the end of strap to itself again with about 1/4 inch seam allowance. And we'll start like back stitching just as before. And back stitch again for reinforcement. And now your adjustable strap is done. So this is just a small scale of what your strap will look like, and later on this will clip to the sides of the bag. So next we'll work on attaching the zipper with the exterior and the linings. Just before we put the zipper in, we're going to baste the pocket to the back piece, and then also baste the connectors for the straps to the sides of the front of the bag. So first I'll show you the pocket. I'm going to use the standard foot on my machine and baste with just the edge of the presser foot along the edge of the fabric. And to do a base stitch, just to hold it in place, I'm going to turn my stitch length to a 4. And sew entirely around the pocket. as you get close to the edge, you will stop about 1/4 of an inch away from the edge of the fabric and lift up the presser foot and turn the material under the needle so you can sew straight along the bottom edge. And do the same thing when you get to the other side. Now, to baste the connectors to the sides of the bag, align the connectors so they are about 1 inch down from the top, and you can still see where my mark was when we did that earlier for the ribbon. So just clip it to the side. And then we'll do the basting stitch with about the edge of the foot again. So now that you've basted the pocket and the connectors, now we're ready to add the zipper. And this part may seem like it's challenging, but I'll take you step by step through it and you'll see how easy it really is. So we're going to take our front and our back of our bag and also our 2 lining pieces. So we're going to unzip the zipper so it'll be easier to sew, and position the zipper so it is centered on the top edge of the bag. And then take some pins and pin it so it is even with the raw edge. And you'll also notice that there's about 1/2 of an inch extra on the sides, and that'll help for turning the bag later on and for perfect corners at the top. So once that is pinned on right side down, then take one of the lining pieces and lay it over top of the zipper and align it with that top edge again. And then add some wonder clips or some more pins to secure those 3 layers in place. Now we'll sew the top edge of the bag so all the layers will be held together. I'm going to turn my stitch length over to 2.5 so we have a tighter stitch. And again, on center needle position and following the edge of the foot will be a good seam allowance. Now, I can feel that the zipper pull is right here underneath, and I'm just going to quick back stitch before I get to it and cut my threads and pull the zipper foot out of the way, and I'm actually going to remove 1 pin so it's a little easier. Probably have to take this one out too, and then move it away from where we'll be sewing. Then just reposition the fabric and pin again. Then just continue where we left off and backstitch all the way to the end. Okay. Now we'll cut our threads and move the lining away from the zipper so the zipper is at the top of the bag. And you can take this over to your iron and press it. And now we're going to switch over to our zipper foot so we can do some close top stitching right next to our zipper. I'm going to attach the foot so it clamps onto the right side because we're going to be top stitching right along this side here. And I just lined the edge of the foot up with the folds, and that'll have a nice top stitch right along our zipper. And sew all the way to the end. And now we'll attach it to the other side of the bag and the lining. So flip it over and make sure that the zipper is right side down on top of the back of the bag. And center it just as we did before. And pin it in place. And then also lay the lining down against the back of the zipper. So I'm going to leave the zipper foot on my machine. I'm actually using a zipper that has a wider tape, so that's why it worked with the standard foot. But if you're using a narrower zipper, then you'll want to use the zipper foot for attaching it to both sides of the bag. So I'll show you both ways. I'm going to leave the zipper foot on the side that it is because I'm going to be sewing on this seam here. And the seam allowance is going to be a little bit different on this side of the bag because we have a different foot. So I'm going to line it up with the edge of the feed dogs here, which was where the standard foot had lined up before. So that way I have the same seam allowance on both sides. And I can feel that pull again, so we're going to back stitch and do just like we did before on the other side. So we'll find the zipper and unzip it out of the way and realign all of the raw edges to finish the seam. And don't forget to back stitch before we begin. And then we'll open it up and we're almost done. So make sure that your linings are on the opposite sides of the bags. You wouldn't want to have the lining over the back side of the zipper because then we'd sew the bag closed when we top stitch it. So make sure they're both on opposite sides of the bags. And you can take this to your iron and press it. But I'm just going to go ahead and top stitch just like we did before. And you can close your zipper too, and that will help keep it flatter. Next, we're ready to put the bag right sides together and finish it up. So take your exterior pieces and bring them so they are right sides together. Then take your lining pieces and have them right sides together as well. We're going to pin all the way around the outside edge of the bag. Now, when you get to the join here, you're going to fold it so that way the zipper is towards the lining side. And make sure, it's really important that this seam here is lined up. So what I like to do is pin this part first. Oh, and before we even begin, unzip your zipper at this point so that way we have an easy way to turn it later. So align the seams, and I like to pin that first so it doesn't move on us. And do that for both sides. And make sure that all of your trims are flat, and we will be sewing them down into the seams so you don't have to worry about these raw edges. I'm going to use Wonder Clips for this part because it's a little thicker area. And I would love to see your bag when you have yours done. I know everyone's going to be different with all the different trims that you find. So join me on Facebook, and I want to see the pictures of your bag after you're done making it. So for the lining, you can pin or use Wonder Clips on both the sides of the bag. And then across the bottom edge, we're going to leave a hole for turning the bag right side out. So use a unique pin or maybe 2 pins together so you remember to stop and start at those points to leave a hole. So I'm going to clip it and leave about a 3 or 4 inch hole in the bottom of my bag. So I'll use these unique pins that I have so I remember to stop and start at those. So we can start at one of those pins and then sew all the way around to the edge of the bag with 3/8 of an inch seam allowance with our standard foot. And this is the last part. So we're almost done. And backstitch as you begin. And I'm just following the edge of the fabric with that 3/8 of an inch guide on the needle plate. And when you reach the corner, stop about 3/8 of an inch with your needle in the down position. And if it's not in the down position, you can just turn the hand wheel and pivot and continue sewing. Now this part is a little bulky because I use the cork, so just sew as close as you can to the end of the lining, and then we'll backstitch and then continue sewing on the exterior. And this will help with our nice clean corners after we turn the bag too. So the important part is to start right where the folds are and the seam for the zipper. And I think this is a great project, especially if you're a beginner sewer, because you get all the practice sewing down the trims, and you get a great professional bag when you're done. So now we're to the other side, and just sew as close as you can. Make sure that you go over that seam. And backstitch. And then we'll just continue sewing to the other pin that we put in, so make sure that you leave that turning hole. And backstitch where the pin was. And now we're ready to turn our bag right side out. So this is the really fun part, and we're almost done. So through the hole, what I like to do is put my hand inside the lining and reach through to the exterior, and then I poke the middle in and the corners, so I grab it, and then I just turn it through the lining. And let me get my hand out. You want to leave a big enough hole for your hand to get through. So stick your hand back through the hole in the lining once you get it all turned. And then you can poke out the corners of the exterior. And you can use a turning tool for this to get the corners nice and sharp. And then do the same for the top while your hand is inside the bag. And you'll see that we have a really nice clean corner, and the edge, folded edge of our zipper tab is not sewn into the seam, which is what we wanted, and our seam is fully enclosed on the corner. Then poke out the corners of the lining. And you can hand sew the turning hole closed, but I'm just going to sew it quick on the machine with about 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. So just line the edges of the lining, so that way there are 3/8 of an inch seam allowance is folded in towards the wrong side of the bag, and line up those folded edges and pin across here, and then you can just top stitch with your machine or use a hand sewing needle. So I just lined it up so my needle is just touching the edge and my fabric is about on the inside of the foot. And backstitch. Then trim all those loose threads and push the lining back into the exterior. So we're all done turning, and you can clip that beautiful strap that we made earlier to each side of the bag, And that's it. That's how easy this bag was to make. I know that you can do it. I want to see your bags. Every bag is going to be unique with the different trims that you select, so I'd love to see your bag when it's done. Share pictures on Instagram and on Facebook. This is a wonderful little bag for putting your wallet, your keys, your sunglasses in here. You have the extra pocket on the back. These are great for gifts if you'd like to make multiple of these. They're super easy to make, and you can't find something of this quality and how cute in the store. So that's why I love to sew, and I hope that you'll share your pictures, and thank you so much for watching.